Okay. Okay. So let's get it started now. What we're going to do in this first part of the live stream is we're going to start and plan our first app. What will this app be? Well, it's going to be a to-do list app, and we're going to follow the book Develop in Swift Data Collections by Apple Education. And for the first part, we will, lay out the planning. So as you can see here, we have a view controller, and a model. As you can see, the planning contains basically the first layout. So going to our planning screen, we can clearly see. Okay, right. So the guided project says that our features is that we should display a list, which we have here in the left view and wireframe. Then we have to add items in the list, which is commonly done with an add button on this view. And we should also be able to edit existing items on the list, which will be done in a detailed view or of this item table list. And then we also should delete items from the list, and automatically save the list to disk, or i.e. our device. So we have our views, and these views are hooked up to so-called view controllers. They are taking user input and processing it, and they are also accessing the model that is behind all of that. And the model will be just a single to-do list item, which, for example, will have a name and a description. Okay, so this is it for our planning, and we are now going to switch to making the project itself. So part 1, we can skip that. You can also, if you want to follow it more closely, you can also open up your iOS device and go look up how the mail app, the built-in mail app or the contacts app is built, because we are closely following the structure of it. So what we're going to do now is, let's look what the guided project tells us. Okay, views, controllers, that we have already talked about that. So part 2, set up project and display model. So if you haven't already, you should get Xcode. You can download it in your app store. it only runs on Mac OS, so you have to have this in place. You can download it, and if you want the book also, you just go to your regular books app and search for develop in Swift data collections, and you will be able to follow more closely. So set up project and display model. Create an Xcode project using the iOS update and name it to-do list. So I've already done that. You just open up Xcode and then you just put in to-do list. Make sure that the interface option is set to storyboard and you use the pre-selected app template for that. Okay. Right, but your first screen will display a table. Okay, let's open up our main storyboard. And we will see the first view controller. This is not what we need, so we can go ahead and delete that completely. We can also delete the view controller that was already created here. We don't need that. We will set up a new one later. So let's look into the instructions that a guided project gives us. So open the main storyboard and drag a navigation controller from the object library. Okay, so we are first going. You can either, I think you can product edit. You can either get the table view control UI table view controller from this here, or you can press Command Shift and L and get this and just type in table view controller and drag it on your main storyboard canvas. Okay, but okay, let's look into the book. They have a navigation controller. Okay, so navigation controller is used so that you can well, navigate through your view hierarchy later. But never mind, it's basically the same view controller right here. So navigation controller, we should add a storyboard entry path is initial view controller. So when we launch the app, we will jump right into this navigation view controller and will be displayed this table view controller right here. So let's do this. We select a simulator right here. There should be some already pre-installed, otherwise you can add additional simulators right here. Let's press play and the app will be built and launched on a simulator shortly. This might take a bit of time depending on the specs of your Mac, but it's only the first time when it starts up. So you get this message, build succeeded, and the simulator will be started. I will add this to my stream right here. So you guys will be able to see it shortly. Okay, so now we have the simulator too. Let's just display the simulator right here in the bottom. Okay. So now let's look into our guided project, what the next task will be. You'd see a single widescreen to initial view. We already did that. Now you see an empty table with the title table view root view controller. Yeah, that's exactly what we see if you look at the simulator. Select the navigation controller and check the prefers large titles box. Okay, so we want large titles for our navigation view controller. So we press on title here, which is, by the way, the navigation bar. And then we will check the prefers large title box. Okay, so now we should have left aligned and a larger title box right here for root view controller. Yes, we have that. Okay, that is good. Next, we will define a model. So we will hide that for now. And open a new Swift file. You can do this with Command N. If you're within Xcode, then press next. And then we will just call this file to do. What they say, file, new file, you can also do that. Instead of pressing the keyboard shortcut. Give it the same name as your model. Yeah, right, it's to do. Okay. So we will define the struct to do, and what properties will each of your model objects require. So now we have to think about what fields we want in our model. So a to-do object should always have a title. So let's create a variable with a title of type string. And well, as you could saw in the planning stage, if you have a to-do, you want to, well, check it. So have I already completed a to-do? So let's create a variable is complete, and the type of it should be, of course, a bool. Usually you would always have a due date. So time how would you call it? Let's look into the book. They call it due date. Okay, due date. Let's just take that. Due date of type date. And well, you should add a description also of type string. And yeah, that is good node object. So let's look into the book what they've made out of the model. Okay, so there are a couple differences. So first, they assign an ID to the to-do object, probably to identify a single to-do object, because you might have two to-dos with the same title and the same due date and probably the same description. So that makes sense. So then due date, that's the same, is complete, is the same, title is the same, notes is probably our description. So let's name it notes, so it's comparable to the book, and they make a question mark behind string. This means that the variable notes is of type optional string, which is not the same as string, but optional string. This means we can assign it the value of nil. So it doesn't have to be a string necessarily, but also can be nil. Which makes sense because not every to-do needs notes. Probably the title for some to-dos might be exhaustive enough. And the last thing that we haven't made, but the book tells us to, is to let the struct to do conform to the protocol equitable. And this means that we can compare different to-dos to each other. And to conform to the protocol equitable, we usually have to add a protocol, the protocol's function that it requires. And this is, let's look at a book, the function equal, and it takes left-hand side as parameter a to-do object. And of course, the right-hand side is also a to-do object. It should return a boolean. And what we want to return is whether the left-hand side's ID equals the right-hand side's ID. Okay. So this should now satisfy our to-do struct. So let's look at a book note at the use of UUID. This is a system provided type that is universally unique value, universally unique ID or value, that's good. That can be used to identify types. Anytime you create one, you're theoretically guaranteed to get a different value, making it a reliable, unique identifier. Apple's implementation conforms to RFC 4122 version 4, if you're interested in learning more. Well, not now. Configure the table view controller. Now that you've defined a model, you need to create the UI table view controller subclass to display a collection of models. Okay. So let's just create this file. We press Command N, and then we create a new Cocoa touch class and name it to do table view controller. Just press next, add it to to-do list. Okay. So create a new this subclass UI table view controller. If you're not deviating from this, name it to do table view controller. Okay. In addition to displaying the list on the table view controller will manage the collection of items. Create an empty array of your model objects inside the class definition. Yeah, okay. So this view controller will handle the work that needs to be done to get the model to the view, and if we change something or add a new item, to get it back to the model. So variable to-dos will be an array, and it will be filled with to-do objects, and it will be initially empty. Okay. Does your table view have multiple sections to consider? In the Contacts app, cells are separated in a section based on the first letter of the first name or the first letter of the last name. In Mail, there are no separate sections for cells. Your app is probably more like Mail, so all cells will be displayed in a single section. Hence, you can delete number of sections in delegate method. What they mean is this method okay, so when we have our to-do app, which is right here, we can, it's a table view, and in a table view we can have multiple sections. So in a to-do app, usually if you have many to-dos, you only need basically one section. So but if we want to, enrich the app and, for example, create a section with active to-dos and archived to-dos, this might come in handy later, but for now we won't delete it, but we just comment this out right here in the data source section. Okay, So what remains is our number of rows in sections. So how many rows are in our single section that we have? Well, it's all the to-dos, and we get this with the array of to-dos, and we take the count of it. Okay, this is completed. The next method to override is table use cell for row add. Okay, so let's cell for row add. This will determine which cell will be displayed in which how it will be displayed in our table view controller, as you can see in the simulator. Okay. So what we're going to do here is first we have to go to this section and create an identifier. What do they use in their book? To do cell identifier. Okay, identifier, which makes perfect sense. Okay, so first change that to do cell identifier. Okay. So, this method is called provides you which cell you're dealing with, right? Ignoring custom cells for now, you follow the standard implementation for this method that you learned in previous lessons. DQ the cell for the given index path, get a model out of the array that corresponds to the cell being displayed, update the cell properties appropriately, and turn the result from the method. Okay. Okay, so let's start going. We have this already. Now we have to configure the cells. So let's get a to-do from our to-dos array at the index path dot row. And now we have to determine the content. For that, we will create a variable called content and get the default cell.default content configuration first. And now we're going to change that default content configuration. The content, I have to go into this. Okay. So how are these cells configured? Style is custom. What do they want in the book? They want text and just a text, okay. Okay, so we don't need to change the cell style. Content.text will be our to-do dot title. And now we can assign this change content configuration to be our new content right here. Okay. Your table view controller subclass is not being utilized yet because the storyboard is using a regular UI table view controller. Open the main storyboard and select the table view controller. Okay, right. We deleted the already defined view controller, and therefore this view controller right here doesn't have assigned to it view controller, which we now changed. Open a selector with custom class. Okay, we now try build. You should see your table view inside the navigation with your own custom title. Okay. Let's see if it worked. I cannot see any changes. Not sure you should see your table you go inside. Custom title. What have they done in the book? To-do cell identifier? I mean, we haven't any data, so to-dos is basically empty, so there are cell returned. Well, there are cells returned, but there are no cells yet. So probably we're going to do that here, supply initial data, close editor, saving them to, but it doesn't make sense to write these features before you can see anything in the table. For now, you can populate it to initial data if no data is retrieved from disk. Okay. Okay, so we first go into the to-do structure and going to write a static function that can be accessed from the struct itself. Load to-dos, takes no parameters and returns an optional array of to-dos. Okay. And it returns nil right now. Create as many model hours, but don't go. The user will eventually clear out. So you just need this room. Okay. Okay, this is not our sample data right here, but this will be the function which will help us retrieve the data from disk. So we will load the to-dos that are already saved and the user has created. So right now we will repeat that with a static function called load sample to-dos. It also takes no parameters and returns an array of to-dos. This is not optional because, I mean, we are certain to return an array of to-dos. So just return and let's create an array. So let's just create some to-do objects, call it clean my room is complete, assign it a false, due date is a date object, and okay, how can we do the current date? Time interval since date dot now. Okay, what are the parameters of this function? Time interval since. Okay, since now. Creates a date value initialized relative to the current date and time by a given number of seconds. Okay, so we know a day has 86,400 seconds, and let's just say we make this in 3 days. Notes is it is very urgent. Okay, to do. Title build an app is complete false. Due date we will make the same date initialized. Time interval since now 86,400 seconds times, let's make it 2 weeks, and nodes nil. And let's just create a third to do, which will be or title like and subscribe is complete for, or make it true. Due date is date dot now. String is display list is going to be great. Careful to do in scope. Okay, I misspelled it. Now it should be correct and give no errors. Okay. With sample data. Okay, so this is not a sample. You distinguish one. Okay, so this is really just bare bones here. Written, and we just okay. This fine. Now that you have some model data to see, build and run your project, you isn't displaying any. Why not? Because we haven't told the do table to-do table view controller that he should use this. We can change this here to do's. We won't create an empty array, but we just call the function right here, load sample to-dos, and this should already do the trick. And we see that it works. It displays in every cell, it displays the text, which is the to-do title: clean my room, build an app, like and subscribe. Okay, so this works. What does the book tell us? As you learned in earlier units, breakpoints are excellent for debugging problems. Try placing breakpoints, number of rows in section, and then run. But did you know how many is called? But there are no items in the array, so the method returns. Okay, so let's just create these breakpoints. You just press the line number here, I think, and let's just run our app and see if there's any output. Okay, so we reach our first breakpoint. Is this the step over? Okay. Okay, section is 0. This is this function right here, which isn't used because we haven't overridden it. Okay, why doesn't it step over when I press this button right here? Okay, we're still at this breakpoint. I don't want to do that. What is this button? Step out, step into. Okay, step into. Okay. Let's just press play again and okay. To-dos free. We see here that there are 3 values, right? Here you can see this has an ID, clean my room, and so on. What is the method now? Had the first. Good. Okay, but how can I go on to the next breakpoint right now? Do I have to get rid of the breakpoint? Why can't I just step over? Okay. What if we step out? We have to step out. Okay. So we see that our to-do or our to-dos array has 3 values. So this function returns 3. So we have number of rows in section. We only have one section, and the number of rows will be 3. So in the next breakpoint, we have the to first of all we have the cell basically, and we have our to do right here, which isn't initialized so far, and we will step over. Okay. And now we're in the next part of the function, and now we should see that this changes, right? Build an app. You see that we have a certain to-do that was assigned here, and now we step through the function and set the content configuration to be the cell, and now we should have returned one cell so far. Okay, I don't want to do that. Okay. This was the first cell, so now let's see if like and subscribe, right? That was our last cell. So let's see if this works too. I mean, it should work. We saw that it works, and indeed it works. So we can remove these breakpoints right here, and see that our app functions properly. Okay. We have done this already. What you'll need to do is add some conditional logic inside view.load. Okay. Why? It would have been displayed. What you'll need. Okay. View.load, try to load items from this if there aren't any. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change this back to initialize to an empty array of to-dos, and just add this code right here, which will determine if we have to-dos already saved to the disk, and if we have them, just load them. So if let's call it save to-dos. Following the book right here is the to-dos. No, not the to-dos array, but our struct, and we call a static function load to-dos. And if we go back right here, we see that the static function returns an optional array of to-dos, and right now it only returns nil. We will implement that in a later part of this series. And what this is right here is what's called optional unwrapping. So this is nothing else than, well, assign the return value of this function to this constant, and if this constant is not nil, then execute this code right here. So what we want to execute right here is, well, assign the save to-dos to our to-dos variable, and else this will be the code if nil is returned from this function, which is done right now, or if the user hasn't any to-dos saved himself right now. This will call our static function on to-do called load sample to-dos. This should do the trick. Let's see if it works. I don't want these. Are these breakpoints deactivated? Oh no, they're not. I don't want these breakpoints anymore. Okay, they're not enabled anymore. Okay, as you can see, our code works perfectly fine. We changed our to-dos variable to be the same as before, and now have our optional unwrapping right here. And if it unwraps to a value that exists, then we use the save to-dos. Otherwise, we just use our sample to-dos for the user. One more thing, if you build and run the app now, it will crash with an assertion failure. DQ cell with the... We don't have any errors. Okay, so this book tells us that if you haven't set this identifier right here, the view controller doesn't know where to well, use this function right here. You see, we put in to-do cell identifier right in here, and now this function can call table view DQ reusable cell with the identifier that we provided. Otherwise, it wouldn't know that we want to display the cells right here in this table view. Because it hasn't been added to the storyboard. Okay, we did that. Open the menu and select the prototype cell in the table view. Use the same identifier string that you supplied in code with the identifier in place. The same data should now display. Okay, we've done that already. And well, this completes part 1 and 2 of our guided project. I hope you enjoyed it. I will come back next time with part 3, where we will edit, where we add an add button on the top right, and right here the add button, and on the left side we will add an edit button, which will probably enable us to add cells and edit cells. But this will be a part of our next video.